Lisa Martinez stepped off the transport shuttle and looked around the massive space station. The metal walls curved high above her head, and through the clear windows, she could see the blue and green planet below. This was Kepler's station, one of the biggest research centers in the galaxy. Scientists from dozens of different worlds came here to share their discoveries. She pulled her small bag closer and walked toward the main conference hall. Her footsteps echoed on the smooth floor. Other beings moved around her, but they all looked very different from humans. Some had blue skin and tall, thin bodies. Others looked like walking crystals that sparkled in the light. A few had tentacles instead of arms and moved by floating slightly above the ground. Lisa had been to meetings like this before, but never one this big. The annual Xenobiology Symposium brought together the smartest scientists in the galaxy. They would spend the next week talking about life forms from distant planets. Lisa studied these alien life forms for a living, just like everyone else here. As she entered the main hall, Lisa noticed how quiet it became. Many of the alien scientists stopped talking and looked at her. She was the only human in a room full of beings from other worlds. This always happened when she attended these meetings. Humans were still new to galactic science. Most aliens thought they were not very smart compared to other species. Lisa found a seat near the back of the room. The chairs were made to fit different body types, so hers adjusted automatically to her human shape. She placed her small notebook on the table and looked around. The hall was huge, with hundreds of seats arranged in curved rows. At the front, a large screen showed the conference schedule. Dr. Kekstar, an Altarian with bright blue skin and 4 arms, walked to the front of the room. He was tall and moved with confidence. His species was known for being very smart, and he was one of the most respected scientists in the galaxy. When he spoke, his voice was deep and clear. "Welcome, fellow researchers, to our annual gathering," he said. "This year, we have exciting new discoveries to discuss. We have found strange life signs in the Tau Ceti system. These signals suggest forms of life unlike anything we have seen before." The room filled with excited murmurs. Lisa leaned forward in her seat. She had read about these signals in the early reports. They were interesting, but she had some ideas about what they might be. Dr. Velnara, a crystalline being from Vega, stood up next. Her body looked like living glass, and when she moved, light danced across her surface. "The data we have collected is very complex," she said. "It will require our best minds to understand what we are seeing." Lisa noticed how Dr. Velnara's eyes briefly looked in her direction when she said, "best minds." It was not said in a mean way, but Lisa could tell what she meant. The crystalline scientists did not think humans belonged in that group. The first day of presentations began. Scientists from different worlds shared their initial findings about the mysterious signals. Each presentation was more complicated than the last. The Proximans, with their tentacle-like arms, showed complex mathematical models. The Altarians presented theories involving multiple dimensions. The vegans suggested that quantum mechanics played a role. Lisa listened carefully to each presentation. She took a few notes in her small notebook, but mostly she just watched and thought. She had developed a good memory over the years, and she could remember most of what she heard. More importantly, she could see patterns that others missed. As the day went on, Lisa began to notice problems with many of the presentations. The scientists were making their theories very complicated when simpler explanations might work better. They were also ignoring some basic facts about how life develops on different planets. During the first break, Lisa walked to the refreshment area. The station provided food and drinks for many different species. She picked up a cup of coffee, one of the few Earth drinks available. As she stood there, she heard 2 Altarian scientists talking nearby. "Did you see the human in the back?" one of them said. She barely took any notes during the presentations. "Probably could not keep up," the other replied. "These concepts are quite advanced. I am not sure why they invited a human to such an important conference." Lisa pretended not to hear them, but their words stung a little. She had heard comments like this many times before. Most aliens in the galactic community thought humans were not very intelligent. They saw humans as a young species that had only recently learned to travel between stars. The truth was more complicated. Humans approached science differently than most other species. While aliens often tried to find complex explanations for everything, humans looked for simple patterns. This different way of thinking sometimes led to better answers, but it was hard to explain to others. After the break, more presentations continued. Lisa watched as scientist after scientist showed increasingly complex theories about the life signals. Some of their ideas were so complicated that even other experts in the room looked confused. But everyone nodded politely and asked thoughtful questions. Lisa wanted to ask questions too, but she knew from experience that her simple approach often made others uncomfortable. When she pointed out that complex theories might be wrong, some scientists got defensive. They thought she was too simple-minded to understand their advanced ideas. As the day ended, Dr. Kekstar announced the schedule for tomorrow. "We will continue our analysis of the Tau Ceti signals," he said. "I hope everyone will come prepared with fresh insights." Lisa gathered her things and prepared to leave. As she walked toward the exit, she heard Dr. Velnara talking to another scientist. "The humans seemed very quiet today," the crystalline being said. "I hope she was able to follow the discussions. Perhaps someone should offer to help her understand the more difficult concepts." Lisa kept walking, but she smiled slightly to herself. If only they knew what she really understood about those signals. She had recognized what they probably were within the first hour of presentations. But she had learned to be patient. Sometimes it was better to wait and see what others discovered on their own. Tomorrow would be another day of complex theories and difficult discussions. Lisa would continue to listen and learn, even if others thought she was not smart enough to contribute. She had been underestimated before, and she had always found ways to prove her worth in the end. The second day of the conference started early. Lisa arrived at the main hall with her small notebook and found the same seat near the back. She noticed that more scientists had arrived overnight. The room was now completely full, with beings from species she had never seen before. Dr. Kekstar began the morning session by reviewing the previous day's presentations. He used the large screen to show charts and graphs that other scientists had created. Lisa looked at the data carefully. She could see several mistakes in how the information was being interpreted, but she stayed quiet. "Today we will dive deeper into the analysis," Dr. Kekstar announced. "We need to understand these life signals better before we can publish our findings." The first presenter was Dr. Zalthek, a scientist from a distant world called Rigel. His species had green skin and large, black eyes. He spoke in a slow, careful way that made everything sound very important. "The signals show patterns that are highly unusual," he said. "We believe they represent a form of life that exists in multiple dimensions at the same time." Lisa frowned slightly. The patterns Dr. Zalthek was showing looked familiar to her, but not for the reasons he suggested. They looked like normal biological processes, just happening in an environment with high radiation levels. As Dr. Zalthek continued his presentation, Lisa made a few notes in her small book. She wrote down some key points, but mostly she was thinking about what she was hearing. Her notes were brief and simple compared to what other scientists were doing. Dr. Velnara, sitting a few rows ahead, turned around and looked at Lisa's notebook. The crystalline being's face showed concern. During the break between presentations, she approached Lisa's seat. "Excuse me," Dr. Velnara said, her voice sounding like music made of glass. "I noticed you are not taking very detailed notes. Are you having trouble following the presentations?" Lisa looked up at the tall, sparkling figure. "No, I'm following them fine. I just don't need to write everything down." Dr. Velnara's crystalline features shifted into what might have been surprise. "But these are very complex concepts." Dr. Zalthek was discussing dimensional biology. "Surely you want to record such advanced theories?" "I understand what he was saying," Lisa replied calmly. "I just think there might be simpler explanations for what we're seeing." The crystalline scientist looked even more concerned. "Simpler explanations? But we are dealing with unknown life forms from distant systems. Simple explanations are unlikely to be correct." Lisa started to respond, but Dr. Velnara had already begun reaching into her bag. She pulled out a data pad filled with detailed notes and charts. "Here," she said, offering the device to Lisa. "You can copy my notes. I have recorded everything in great detail. It might help you understand the more difficult parts." Lisa felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she kept her voice steady. "Thank you, but I don't need to copy anyone's notes. I'm doing fine on my own." Dr. Velnara looked uncertain. "Are you sure? I would not want you to miss important information because the concepts are too advanced." Before Lisa could respond, Dr. Kekstar called for everyone to return to their seats. The next presentation was about to begin. Dr. Velnara gave Lisa one more worried look before walking back to her seat. The morning continued with more presentations. Each scientist tried to outdo the previous one with increasingly complex theories. Lisa listened to discussions about quantum biology, dimensional phase shifts, and multitemporal life cycles. Every explanation was more complicated than the last. During lunch break, Lisa sat alone at a small table in the station's cafeteria. She was eating a simple sandwich when three Altarian scientists approached her table. They were all tall with blue skin, and they looked down at her with expressions that seemed friendly but felt condescending. "Mind if we join you?" asked one of them, a female scientist named Dr. Raksani. "We wanted to check how you are finding the conference." "It's interesting," Lisa said, taking a bite of her sandwich. "We noticed you seem quite quiet during the sessions," said another Altarian, Dr. Mortek. "Are you finding the material challenging?" Lisa looked at the three blue faces staring at her. "No, not really. I'm just listening and thinking." Dr. Raksani exchanged a look with her colleagues. "That's good to hear. Sometimes these conferences can be overwhelming, especially for newer participants in galactic science." The way she said newer participants made it clear she meant humans. Lisa had heard this kind of careful language before. It was meant to sound polite while still making the point that humans were not as advanced as other species. "We were thinking," Dr. Mortek continued, "that it might be helpful if one of us sat with you this afternoon. We could explain some of the more difficult concepts as they come up." Lisa put down her sandwich and looked at each of the Altarians. "I appreciate the offer, but I don't need help understanding the presentations." The third Altarian, who had not spoken yet, laughed gently. "I admire your confidence," he said. "But some of this afternoon's topics are quite advanced. We will be discussing theoretical frameworks that took our species decades to develop." "Maybe you could just observe quietly," Dr. Raksani suggested. "There's no shame in admitting when something is beyond your current level of understanding." Lisa felt her patience starting to wear thin, but she kept her voice calm. "I think I'll continue the way I have been, thank you." The three Altarians looked at each other again. Dr. Mortek shrugged his four shoulders. "Well, if you change your mind, we're happy to help. We know what it's like to be new to advanced scientific discussions." After they left, Lisa sat alone and finished her lunch. She thought about what had just happened. These scientists meant well, but they could not see past their assumptions about humans. They thought she was struggling to keep up when really she was ahead of most of them. The afternoon sessions began with even more complex presentations. Lisa noticed that Dr. Velnara kept looking back at her, checking to see if she was taking notes. Dr. Kekstar spoke more slowly when he asked if there were any questions, and his eyes always lingered on Lisa as if he was waiting for her to ask for clarification. When Dr. Zolthek presented his final conclusions about the dimensional biology theory, Lisa raised her hand. The room became very quiet. All eyes turned to look at the human in the back. "Yes?" Dr. Zolthek said, his voice careful and patient. "I was wondering about the radiation levels in the system where these signals were detected," Lisa said. "Have you considered how high-energy environments might affect normal biological processes?" Dr. Zolthek blinked his large black eyes slowly. "We are not dealing with normal biological processes," he said, speaking even more slowly than before. "These are clearly signs of advanced, multidimensional life forms." "But what if they're not?" Lisa asked. What if these patterns could be explained by regular biology adapting to unusual conditions? The room was completely silent now. Dr. Velnara looked shocked that the human was challenging such an advanced theory. Dr. Kekstar's 4 arms crossed in front of his chest, and his expression showed he was not pleased. I think, Dr. Zolthek said carefully, that we should focus on the evidence we have rather than oversimplifying complex phenomena. Lisa nodded and sat back in her chair. She had made her point, even if no one wanted to hear it. Tomorrow would bring more presentations and more opportunities to see if anyone would consider that the simplest explanation might be the right one. The third day of the conference was the most important one. Today, all the scientists would present their final theories about the mysterious life signals from Tau Ceti. Lisa arrived early and took her usual seat in the back. The room buzzed with excitement and nervous energy. Dr. Kekstar stood at the front, his 4 blue arms gesturing as he spoke. Today we will hear the culmination of our collaborative analysis. Each research team has prepared their conclusions about these remarkable signals. Lisa opened her small notebook to a fresh page, but she already had a good idea of what she would hear. The past 2 days had shown her that most of the scientists were making the same basic mistake. They were looking for complex explanations when simple ones would work better. The first team to present was led by Dr. Velnara. The crystalline scientist's body sparkled as she moved to the front of the room. Her presentation appeared on the large screen, filled with complicated diagrams and mathematical equations. Our analysis suggests these signals represent a form of crystalline life, she began. The patterns show harmonic resonances that could only come from living crystal structures. These beings might exist as pure energy patterns, shifting between solid and energy states. Lisa looked at the data Dr. Velnara was showing. The patterns did have regular frequencies, but they looked more like the rhythms of normal biological processes to her. Hearts beating, lungs breathing, cells dividing, all of these created regular patterns too. Dr. Velnara continued her presentation for 20 minutes, building an elaborate theory about energy-based life forms. When she finished, several scientists asked impressed questions about the mathematical models she had used. Next came the Proximan team. Dr. Fluxera floated to the front of the room, his tentacles moving gracefully through the air. His species was known for their advanced understanding of physics and chemistry. We believe these signals show evidence of quantum biological organisms, he announced. These life forms exist in multiple quantum states simultaneously. They can be alive and not alive at the same time, until observed by outside intelligence. The presentation that followed was even more complex than the first one. Dr. Fluxera showed equations that filled entire screens, with symbols that Lisa recognized from advanced physics textbooks. Many of the other scientists in the room looked confused, but they nodded politely anyway. Lisa wrote down a few key points, but she was growing more frustrated with each presentation. The quantum biology theory had the same problem as the crystalline life theory. It was looking for exotic explanations when ordinary ones would work just as well. The third presentation came from Dr. Zolthek, who had spoken the day before. His green skin seemed to glow slightly as he presented his dimensional biology theory in even greater detail. These organisms exist across multiple dimensions, he declared. What we are seeing are just shadows of their true forms. The real beings live in spaces we cannot even imagine. Lisa watched as Dr. Zolthek showed computer simulations of beings moving through different dimensions. The graphics were impressive, and the theory sounded very advanced. But when she looked at the actual data, she saw the same patterns she had recognized from the beginning. One by one, each research team presented increasingly elaborate theories. There were talks about time-traveling organisms, beings made of pure thought, and life forms that existed only in mathematical abstractions. Each presentation was more complex and harder to understand than the last. By lunchtime, Lisa had heard 7 different exotic theories about the Tau Ceti signals. All of them involved advanced physics and concepts that pushed the boundaries of known science. All of them ignored the simple biological explanations that Lisa could see in the data. During the break, she overheard groups of scientists discussing the presentations. They were all very excited about the advanced theories they had heard. Many admitted they did not fully understand all the concepts, but they seemed impressed by how complicated everything was. Such sophisticated thinking, Dr. Velnara was saying to a group of colleagues. I never would have thought to consider quantum states in biological analysis. The dimensional theory is fascinating too, replied Dr. Kekstar. Though I must admit, some of the mathematics are beyond my current understanding. Lisa wanted to speak up, but she knew how her simple explanations would be received. She had tried to make her points yesterday and been dismissed. Today's atmosphere was even more focused on complex, advanced theories. The afternoon session continued with the final presentations. Each one tried to outdo the previous theories in terms of complexity and exotic physics. Lisa listened to discussions about organisms that existed as pure information, beings that traveled through time to reproduce, and life forms that could only be detected by their effects on space itself. Finally, Dr. Kekstar announced that all the presentations were complete. Now we will open the floor for general discussion, he said. Does anyone have questions or comments about what we have heard today? Several hands went up immediately. Scientists asked detailed questions about mathematical proofs, theoretical frameworks, and experimental designs. Everyone seemed very impressed with the advanced nature of all the theories. Lisa sat quietly for several minutes, listening to the discussion. She knew she should speak up, but she also knew how her comments would be received. Finally, she decided she had to try one more time. She raised her hand. The room became quiet. Dr. Kekstar looked slightly surprised. Yes. Do you have a question? Lisa stood up slowly. I've been listening to all these presentations today, and I have a concern about the general approach we're taking. What kind of concern? Dr. Kekstar asked, his voice careful. All of these theories are very complex and involve exotic physics, Lisa said. But has anyone considered that these signals might have simpler explanations? Dr. Velnara turned in her seat to look at Lisa. What do you mean by simpler explanations? I mean normal biology, Lisa replied. Living organisms adapting to high radiation environments. The patterns in the signals look like biological rhythms to me. Heartbeats, breathing cycles, cellular reproduction. The room was completely silent now. Lisa could feel dozens of alien eyes staring at her. Some looked confused, others looked annoyed. Dr. Zolthek spoke first. But these signals come from a system with extreme radiation levels. Normal biology could not survive in such conditions. Normal Earth biology couldn't, Lisa agreed. But life adapts. On Earth, we have organisms that live in incredibly harsh conditions. Deep ocean vents, radioactive sites, extreme temperatures. Life finds a way. Dr. Fluxera's tentacles waved dismissively. You are suggesting that we ignore all the advanced analysis we have done in favor of simple explanations? I'm suggesting that sometimes the simple explanation is the right one, Lisa said. When you hear hoofbeats, think horses, not zebras. Several scientists looked confused by the Earth saying. Dr. Kekstar's 4 arms crossed in front of his chest. I think, he said slowly, that we should be careful not to underestimate the complexity of what we are dealing with. These signals represent something truly unusual, and they require advanced theoretical frameworks to understand. Lisa looked around the room. She could see that most of the scientists disagreed with her approach. They believed that complex problems required complex solutions. The idea that something unusual might have a simple explanation seemed almost offensive to them. I understand, she said finally, and sat back down. But as the discussion continued around her, Lisa knew she was right. The signals from Tau Ceti were not signs of exotic life forms or advanced physics. They were something much more ordinary, but no less interesting. She just had to find a way to prove it. That evening, Lisa felt restless. The day's presentations had frustrated her more than she wanted to admit. She had listened to hours of complex theories that missed what seemed obvious to her. While other scientists were at dinner discussing dimensional biology and quantum organisms, Lisa decided to do something different. She made her way to the station's main computer lab. The room was quiet and dimly lit, with dozens of workstations arranged in neat rows. Most scientists were either eating or socializing, so Lisa had the place almost to herself. She sat down at a terminal near the back and logged in with her conference credentials. The raw data from the Tau Ceti system was available to all conference participants. Lisa pulled up the files and spread them across multiple screens. Numbers, graphs, and signal patterns filled the displays around her. This was the same data that every research team had been analyzing for weeks. But Lisa looked at it differently than the others had. Instead of searching for exotic explanations, she started with basic questions. What did these patterns remind her of? What natural processes created similar rhythms? She began by filtering out background noise and isolating the clearest signals. The patterns that emerged were complex but not chaotic. They had structure, repetition, and variation, all signs of biological activity. Lisa felt her excitement growing as she worked. The first thing she noticed was that the signals came in clusters. Groups of activity followed by periods of relative quiet, then more activity. This pattern was common in biology. Many living things had active and rest periods built into their daily cycles. Next, Lisa looked at the frequency patterns within each cluster. Here she found something even more interesting. The signals showed multiple overlapping rhythms at different speeds. Some were fast and regular, others were slower with more variation. It reminded her of the complex biological systems she had studied on Earth. She pulled up comparison data from her personal files. Over the years, Lisa had collected information about organisms that lived in extreme environments. Deep-sea creatures near volcanic vents, bacteria in radioactive sites, plants in high radiation zones. All of them showed similar patterns of biological activity. As Lisa worked, she began to build a simple but complete picture of what the Tau Ceti signals represented. These were not exotic life forms or advanced physics phenomena. They were normal biological processes adapted to an extreme environment. The organisms creating these signals had evolved to live with high levels of radiation. Their cellular processes had adapted to use the radiation as an energy source, similar to how plants use sunlight. The complex patterns in the signals showed how these organisms managed energy, reproduced, and maintained their biological functions. Lisa was so focused on her analysis that she did not hear footsteps approaching behind her. It was only when a shadow fell across her workstation that she realized someone else was in the lab. Working late, came a familiar deep voice. Lisa turned to see Dr. Kekstar standing behind her. The tall Altarian scientist looked tired, and his usual confident expression seemed less certain than normal. Just reviewing the data, Lisa said, minimizing some of her analysis screens. Dr. Kekstar moved closer and looked at the displays that were still visible. His 4 eyes scanned the graphs and numbers, and Lisa could see his confusion growing. "This looks different from the analysis I saw today," he said. "What approach are you using?" Lisa hesitated. She could hide her work and avoid another confrontation about simple versus complex explanations. But she was tired of being dismissed and patronized. Maybe it was time to be direct. "I'm looking at these signals as biological data," she said. "Not as physics phenomena." Dr. Kekstar's blue skin darkened slightly, which Lisa had learned was a sign of confusion in his species. "Biological? But we established that normal biology could not survive in that radiation environment." "Normal Earth biology couldn't," Lisa agreed. "But evolution is amazing. Life adapts to conditions we think are impossible." She expanded her analysis screens and began walking Dr. Kekstar through her findings. She showed him how the signal patterns matched biological rhythms, how the clustering suggested active and rest cycles, and how the frequency variations indicated complex metabolic processes. At first, Dr. Kekstar looked skeptical. His 4 arms crossed in front of his chest, and he asked challenging questions about radiation tolerance and energy requirements. But as Lisa continued her explanation, his posture began to change. "You are suggesting these organisms use radiation as an energy source?" he asked. "Like photosynthesis, but with high-energy particles instead of light," Lisa confirmed. "We have bacteria on Earth that do similar things with much lower radiation levels." Dr. Kekstar was quiet for several minutes, studying Lisa's data. She could see him thinking, comparing what she was showing him with the complex theories he had heard all day. This is much simpler than what Dr. Zolthek proposed, he said finally. Simple doesn't mean wrong, Lisa replied. Sometimes the most obvious explanation is the right one. Dr. Kekstar sat down at the workstation next to Lisa's. Show me more, he said. For the next hour, Lisa walked the Altarian scientist through her complete analysis. She showed him how the signals indicated not just one species, but an entire ecosystem of radiation-adapted organisms. There were patterns that suggested predator-prey relationships, reproductive cycles, and even what might be social behaviors. The more Dr. Kekstar saw, the more convinced he became. Lisa's explanation was not only simpler than the exotic theories presented that day, it was also more complete. It accounted for all the data, not just selected pieces that fit complex theoretical frameworks. This changes everything, Dr. Kekstar said quietly. It doesn't have to change anything, Lisa replied. It just means we have a different explanation for what we're seeing. But Dr. Kekstar was already standing up, his excitement visible in his posture. The conference committee needs to see this. Dr. Velnara, Dr. Zolthek, all of them. This analysis is remarkable. Lisa felt a familiar nervousness. I don't think they'll be interested in hearing from me again. Today's discussion didn't go very well. Dr. Kekstar looked at her with an expression she had never seen before. It was respect, mixed with something that might have been embarrassment. Perhaps, he said carefully, we have not been listening as well as we should have. Word of Lisa's analysis spread quickly through the station's scientific community. By the time she returned to her quarters that night, she had received messages from several research teams asking to see her work. The simple biological explanation that had been dismissed during the day's discussions was suddenly very interesting to everyone. Lisa lay in her bed that night, looking out at the stars through her small window. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. She would have to present her findings to scientists who had spent days developing complex theories. Some would be open to her ideas, but others might resist having their advanced work challenged by simple explanations. But for tonight, Lisa felt satisfied. She had followed the evidence where it led, regardless of what others expected to find. The organisms in the Tau Ceti system were remarkable not because they involved exotic physics, but because they showed how life could adapt and thrive in conditions that seemed impossible. Sometimes the most extraordinary discoveries came from recognizing that extraordinary things could have ordinary explanations. The next morning, Lisa arrived at the conference hall to find it buzzing with unusual energy. Scientists stood in small groups, talking quietly but intensely. Many of them looked in her direction when she entered, and she heard her name mentioned in several conversations. Dr. Kekstar had kept his word. News of her biological analysis had spread through the conference overnight. Lisa could see data pads and portable screens showing her work being passed between research teams. Some scientists looked intrigued, others appeared skeptical or confused. Lisa took her usual seat in the back, but today felt different. The morning session was supposed to be a general discussion of all the theories presented the day before. Instead, it seemed like everyone wanted to talk about the new biological interpretation of the Tau Ceti signals. Dr. Velnara approached Lisa's seat before the session began. The crystalline scientist moved with less confidence than usual, and her sparkling surface seemed dimmer somehow. I hear you have developed an alternative theory about the signals, she said, her musical voice carrying a note of uncertainty. Not really a theory, Lisa replied. Just a different way of looking at the same data. Dr. Velnara held up a data pad showing Lisa's analysis. Dr. Kekstar shared some of your work with the research committee. Your approach is quite different from what we discussed yesterday. Different doesn't mean better or worse, Lisa said carefully. It's just another perspective. But Dr. Velnara was studying the data pad with growing fascination. You identify these patterns as biological rhythms. The mathematical models you use are much simpler than ours, but they seem to account for more of the observed data. Lisa nodded. Biology tends to create patterns that look complex but follow simple rules. Like fractals or crystal growth patterns. Dr. Velnara's crystalline features shifted into what might have been surprise. You compare biological patterns to crystal growth? All natural processes follow similar mathematical principles, Lisa explained. The same equations that describe how crystals form can describe how populations grow or how neural networks develop. The crystalline scientist was quiet for a moment, processing this information. Then she did something unexpected. She sat down in the empty seat next to Lisa. "I must admit," Dr. Velnara said quietly, "that I may have underestimated your understanding of these concepts." Before Lisa could respond, Dr. Kekstar called the session to order. But instead of beginning with the planned discussion, he made an announcement. "This morning we will hear a presentation of new analysis that has come to our attention," he said. Dr. Martinez has developed a biological interpretation of the Tau Ceti signals that differs significantly from yesterday's presentations. Lisa felt her stomach tighten. She had not expected to give a formal presentation. She had simply shared her analysis with Dr. Kekstar the night before. "Dr. Martinez," Dr. Kekstar continued, "would you please come forward and share your findings with the full conference?" Every eye in the room turned to look at Lisa. She could feel the weight of their attention, and she remembered all the dismissive comments and condescending offers of help from the past few days. Part of her wanted to decline and avoid another confrontation. But a larger part of her knew this was important. The biological explanation for the Tau Ceti signals was not just simpler than the exotic theories, it was also more accurate. The scientific community deserved to hear all possible interpretations of the data. Lisa stood up and walked to the front of the room. Dr. Kekstar handed her the presenter's control device, and the large screen activated. She connected her data pad and began loading her analysis. "I want to start by saying that I have great respect for all the work we heard yesterday," Lisa began. "The theoretical frameworks presented were sophisticated and well-researched. But I think there might be a simpler explanation for what we're seeing." She displayed the raw signal data on the screen. "When I look at these patterns, I don't see evidence of exotic physics or advanced life forms. I see normal biological processes adapted to an extreme environment." Lisa walked through her analysis step by step. She showed how the signal clusters matched the active and rest cycles of living organisms. She demonstrated how the frequency patterns indicated complex metabolic processes. She explained how similar adaptations had evolved on Earth in much less extreme conditions. As she spoke, Lisa noticed the room becoming very quiet. Scientists who had been chatting and moving around during previous presentations were now sitting still and paying close attention. Dr. Velnara was taking detailed notes on her data pad, something Lisa had never seen her do during other presentations. "The key insight," Lisa continued, "is that these organisms have evolved to use high-energy radiation as their primary energy source. Instead of being destroyed by radiation, they have adapted to harvest it, similar to how plants harvest sunlight for photosynthesis." Dr. Zolfek raised his hand. "But the radiation levels in that system are thousands of times higher than anything we see around normal stars. How could any biological system tolerate such conditions?" Lisa had expected this question. Evolution is remarkable at finding solutions to environmental challenges. On Earth, we have organisms that live in conditions we once thought were impossible. Near volcanic vents with temperatures over 400 degrees. In water so acidic it would dissolve metal. Even in highly radioactive environments. She displayed comparison data from Earth organisms. Life doesn't just tolerate extreme conditions, it often thrives in them. When conditions are too harsh for competitors, adapted organisms can dominate entire ecosystems. Dr. Fluxera's tentacles waved as he spoke. "This interpretation suggests an entire ecosystem of radiation-adapted organisms. That seems quite extraordinary." "Extraordinary, yes," Lisa agreed. "But not impossible. And certainly not more extraordinary than dimensional beings or quantum organisms." The room fell silent again. Lisa realized she had just pointed out that her simple explanation was actually more plausible than the complex theories everyone had been so impressed with the day before. Dr. Velnara stood up. "Dr. Martinez, may I ask about your background? Your analysis demonstrates a deep understanding of both biology and environmental adaptation." Lisa felt a familiar nervousness. Questions about her background often led to uncomfortable realizations about how her work had been dismissed. "I've been studying xenobiology for about 25 years, she said simply. 25 years? Dr. Kekstar looked surprised. That would mean you began your research quite early in the development of galactic xenobiology. Lisa nodded. I started as a graduate student when the field was just getting established. Dr. Velnara was looking at her data pad with a strange expression. Dr. Martinez, could you tell us your full name? Lisa Martinez, she replied, wondering where this was going. Dr. Velnara's crystalline features suddenly brightened significantly. Lisa Martinez, she repeated slowly. Not L. Martinez. Lisa felt her heart skip a beat. Yes, L. Martinez is how I publish my research papers. The room became completely silent. Dr. Velnara was staring at her data pad with what looked like shock. Dr. Kekstar's forearms had gone rigid. Dr. Zolthek's large black eyes were wider than Lisa had ever seen them. Dr. Velnara's voice was barely above a whisper when she spoke. You wrote Principles of Adaptive Xenobiology? Lisa nodded slowly. Yes, that was my doctoral dissertation. And environmental pressures in alien evolution? Dr. Kekstar asked, his voice sounding strange. My postdoctoral research, Lisa confirmed. Dr. Fluxera's tentacles were trembling. The entire Foundations of Xenobiological Theory series? I've written a lot of papers over the years, Lisa said, beginning to understand what was happening. The room erupted in shocked murmurs and excited conversations. Scientists were pulling up reference lists on their data pads and comparing names. Lisa could see the recognition spreading through the room like a wave. She was not just any human scientist who had been invited to the conference. She was L. Martinez, the author of most of the foundational texts in modern xenobiology. The same scientists who had been offering to help her understand advanced concepts had been citing her work in their own research for years. Dr. Velnara's voice carried clearly over the noise in the room. We have been studying your textbooks for decades. The conference hall remained in stunned silence for several long moments after Dr. Velnara's revelation. Lisa stood at the front of the room, watching as scientists frantically checked their reference databases and compared publication records. The looks of shock and embarrassment on their faces told her everything she needed to know. Dr. Kekstar was the first to speak. His forearms hung at his sides, and his usual confident posture had disappeared entirely. Dr. Martinez, he said slowly, I believe we owe you a significant apology. Lisa felt uncomfortable with the sudden attention. There's no need for apologies. You didn't know who I was. But we should have listened to your expertise regardless of who you were, Dr. Velnara said, her crystalline voice carrying notes of regret. Your analysis of the Tau Ceti signals demonstrates exactly the kind of thinking that made your foundational papers so important to our field. Dr. Zolthek stood up from his seat, his green skin looking pale. Dr. Martinez, I used your theoretical framework for environmental adaptation in my presentation yesterday. I should have recognized the approach you were suggesting. Lisa looked around the room at dozens of alien scientists, all staring at her with new understanding. The same beings who had offered to explain advanced concepts to her just days before were now realizing they had been talking to the person who created many of those concepts. I think, said Dr. Kekstar, that we should start this session over. Dr. Martinez, would you be willing to present your complete analysis of the Tau Ceti signals? Lisa nodded and returned to the presentation screen. But this time, the atmosphere in the room was completely different. Instead of polite but dismissive attention, she now had the focused interest of every scientist present. She began her presentation again, but with more detail and confidence. She explained how the biological interpretation not only accounted for all the observed data, but also predicted what additional signals they might find if they looked more carefully. If these are indeed radiation-adapted organisms, Lisa continued, we should see seasonal variations in their activity levels. We should also find evidence of different species occupying different radiation zones, similar to how Earth organisms occupy different temperature or depth zones. Dr. Fluxera raised a tentacle. Your prediction about seasonal variations, that assumes these organisms have evolved complex behavioral patterns. Is that supported by the data? Lisa smiled. This was the kind of scientific question she enjoyed answering. Actually, yes. If you look at the long-term signal patterns, there are definite cycles that correspond to the orbital periods of planets in the system. The organisms seem to respond to changes in radiation flux as the planets move closer to and farther from their star. She displayed additional analysis showing these longer patterns. Several scientists leaned forward in their seats to get a better look at the data. Dr. Velnara spoke up. This level of environmental responsiveness suggests these organisms have sophisticated sensory systems. Could they be intelligent? Possibly, Lisa replied. But intelligence isn't required for complex environmental responses. Many simple organisms on Earth show remarkably complex behaviors in response to environmental changes. For the next hour, Lisa fielded questions that demonstrated genuine scientific curiosity rather than condescension. Scientists asked about evolutionary timescales, energy requirements, reproductive strategies, and ecological relationships. Each question led to deeper discussion about the biological possibilities represented by the Tau Ceti signals. Dr. Kekstar eventually called for a break, but many scientists approached Lisa instead of leaving for refreshments. Dr. Velnara was among the first to reach her. Dr. Martinez, I must ask your forgiveness for my behavior over the past few days, the crystalline scientist said. I offered to share my notes with you, not realizing I was talking to the person whose work formed the basis for those notes. Lisa felt embarrassed by the attention. Really, it's fine. I'm used to being underestimated at these conferences. That's exactly the problem, Dr. Zolfek interjected, joining their conversation. We made assumptions based on the fact that I'm human, Lisa finished for him. I know. It happens a lot. Dr. Kekstar approached their group, looking serious. Dr. Martinez, the conference organizing committee would like to make a formal request. Would you be willing to present your complete analysis as the keynote address for tomorrow's final session? Lisa was surprised. Keynote addresses were usually reserved for the most distinguished scientists in the field. Are you sure? There are many other qualified researchers here. None of them wrote the foundational texts we all study, Dr. Velnara pointed out. Your biological interpretation of the Tau Ceti signals represents exactly the kind of innovative thinking that advances our field. Lisa agreed to give the keynote address, and word spread quickly through the conference. By evening, scientists from other research areas had arrived to hear her presentation. The dining hall was buzzing with conversations about biological adaptation and environmental evolution. Lisa found herself invited to join discussion groups that had previously ignored her. Dr. Raksani, one of the Altarian scientists who had offered to help her understand advanced concepts, approached her during dinner. Dr. Martinez, I wanted to apologize for my comments yesterday, she said. I suggested you might need help understanding theoretical frameworks, not realizing you were the person who developed many of those frameworks. I appreciate that, Lisa replied. But I hope this experience teaches us something about making assumptions. Dr. Raksani nodded seriously. You're absolutely right. We let our preconceptions about human capabilities blind us to your obvious expertise. That evening, Lisa worked late into the night preparing her keynote presentation. She wanted to do more than just explain her biological interpretation of the signals. She wanted to address the broader issue of how scientific communities could avoid the kind of prejudice that had affected this conference. As she worked, Lisa reflected on the events of the past few days. The same scientists who had dismissed her simple questions were now eager to hear her theories. The difference was not in her knowledge or her analysis, it was in their perception of her credentials. She thought about all the times her contributions had been overlooked or dismissed, not because they were wrong, but because other scientists had preconceived ideas about human capabilities. How many good ideas had been lost because of such prejudices? But she also felt hopeful. The response to her work showed that the scientific community could change its attitudes when presented with clear evidence. The key was creating opportunities for that evidence to be seen and evaluated fairly. Lisa finished her presentation preparation around midnight. Tomorrow, she would not only explain the biological interpretation of the Tau Ceti signals, but also challenge the galactic scientific community to examine its own biases and assumptions. As she prepared for sleep, Lisa looked out her window at the stars. Somewhere out there, In the Tau Ceti system, organisms were living and thriving in conditions that most scientists had thought impossible. They had adapted and evolved solutions to environmental challenges that seemed insurmountable. In some ways, Lisa realized, she had been doing the same thing. She had adapted to an environment of scientific prejudice and dismissive attitudes, finding ways to continue her research and share her insights despite the obstacles. Tomorrow would mark a new phase in her career and perhaps in how the galactic scientific community approached collaboration with human researchers. The recognition of her expertise was long overdue, but it was never too late to build better relationships and more open scientific dialogue. The final day of the conference brought the largest audience Lisa had ever seen at a xenobiology symposium. Word of her identity and analysis had spread beyond the original conference participants. Scientists from other fields, station administrators, and even some journalists had arrived to hear her keynote address. Lisa stood backstage, looking through a small window at the packed auditorium. The main hall had been expanded to accommodate nearly twice as many attendees as the conference originally planned. She could see scientists from dozens of different species, many of whom she recognized from their published research. Dr. Kekstar approached her, looking nervous but excited. "Dr. Martinez, are you ready? The audience is quite eager to hear what you have to say." Lisa nodded, though she felt butterflies in her stomach. "I think so. This is a larger crowd than I expected." "Word has spread quickly through the galactic research community," Dr. Kekstar explained. "Many scientists want to hear directly from the author of the foundational texts they have studied for years." Lisa took a deep breath and walked onto the stage. The auditorium fell silent as she approached the podium. Looking out at the sea of alien faces, she could see the same scientists who had dismissed her just days before now watching her with respectful attention. "Good morning," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the hall. "I want to start by thanking the conference organizers for this opportunity. The past few days have been educational for all of us, I think, in ways we didn't expect." She activated the presentation screen and displayed the Tau Ceti signal data. "Today I want to talk about two things. First, I'll explain my biological interpretation of these signals. But more importantly, I want to discuss what this week has taught us about scientific collaboration and the dangers of making assumptions." Lisa began with her analysis of the signals, walking through her interpretation step by step. She showed how the patterns indicated biological rhythms, how the clustering suggested ecological relationships, and how the frequency variations revealed complex metabolic processes. "The key insight," she explained, "is recognizing that evolution creates solutions we often don't expect. Life adapts to conditions we think are impossible, using strategies we haven't imagined. These organisms have turned deadly radiation into their primary energy source." Dr. Velnara raised her hand. "Dr. Martinez, your analysis suggests these organisms represent an entirely new category of life. How does this fit with existing taxonomic frameworks?" Lisa smiled. This was exactly the kind of thoughtful question she hoped to receive. "That's an excellent point. We may need to expand our classification systems to include radiation-based metabolisms. These organisms probably represent an evolutionary path that doesn't exist elsewhere in the galaxy." She continued her presentation, explaining how the biological interpretation made testable predictions about what additional discoveries they might make in the Tau Ceti system. But then she shifted to her second topic. "Now I want to address something more uncomfortable," Lisa said. "This week has shown us how our assumptions can blind us to obvious solutions." The auditorium became very quiet. Lisa could see some scientists shifting uncomfortably in their seats. For 3 days, brilliant researchers developed increasingly complex theories to explain these signals. But when I suggested simple biological explanations, those ideas were dismissed. Not because they were wrong, but because they came from someone who was seen as less capable. Dr. Zolthek spoke up. "Dr. Martinez, I think we have all learned from our mistakes this week. Your expertise was not properly recognized." "But that's exactly my point," Lisa replied. "The problem wasn't failing to recognize my specific credentials. The problem was assuming that simple explanations from any source weren't worth considering." He displayed a new slide showing examples from the history of science. Some of the greatest discoveries have come from recognizing simple patterns that others overlooked. Continental drift was dismissed for decades because it seemed too simple. The bacterial origin of ulcers was ridiculed because it challenged complex theories about stress and diet. Lisa looked around the auditorium. We've made remarkable progress in understanding life throughout the galaxy. But we've also developed a bias toward complexity. We assume that unusual phenomena require exotic explanations. Dr. Fluxera's tentacles waved thoughtfully. Are you suggesting we should always prefer simple explanations? I'm suggesting we should consider all explanations fairly, Lisa answered. Complexity isn't automatically better than simplicity. And simple explanations aren't automatically worse than complex ones. The best explanation is the one that accounts for the data most completely. She displayed examples of her own research over the years. Human approaches to xenobiology often emphasize pattern recognition and adaptation. We look for ways that life might modify itself to survive in new environments. This comes from our own evolutionary experience. Lisa explained how human evolution had required remarkable adaptability. Our species survived by being flexible, by finding new solutions to environmental challenges. This background makes us naturally inclined to look for adaptive solutions rather than exotic physics. Dr. Velnara's crystalline voice carried a note of curiosity. You're suggesting that different species bring different perspectives to scientific research? Absolutely, Lisa confirmed. Altarian approaches emphasize mathematical precision because your species evolved in highly structured social environments. Vegan crystalline thinking focuses on harmonic relationships because your biology is based on resonant structures. Human thinking emphasizes adaptation and pattern recognition because our survival depended on flexibility. She paused to let this sink in. None of these approaches is better or worse than the others. But each one sees patterns that the others might miss. Dr. Kekstar stood up. Dr. Martinez, what you're describing suggests we need more diverse research teams, not just teams of the most credentialed scientists. Exactly, Lisa agreed. The best science happens when different perspectives work together. But that only works if we actually listen to each other, regardless of species or credentials. Lisa spent the next 20 minutes discussing specific strategies for improving scientific collaboration. She talked about the importance of evaluating ideas on their merit rather than their source, of considering simple explanations alongside complex ones, and of recognizing that expertise can take many forms. The Tau Ceti signals taught us something important, she concluded. Sometimes the most extraordinary discoveries come from recognizing that extraordinary things can have ordinary explanations. But we can only make those discoveries if we're willing to listen to all perspectives. The auditorium erupted in sustained applause. Scientists from dozens of species stood to show their appreciation, not just for Lisa's analysis of the signals, but for her broader message about scientific collaboration. Dr. Kekstar approached the podium as the applause continued. Dr. Martinez, on behalf of the entire galactic xenobiology community, I want to thank you for this presentation. You have given us both scientific insights and important lessons about how we conduct our research. Lisa felt a mix of satisfaction and hope. The recognition was gratifying, but more importantly, she felt like she had started important conversations about bias and collaboration in scientific communities. As scientists began to file out of the auditorium, many approached Lisa with requests for collaboration, invitations to present at other conferences, and proposals for joint research projects. The same community that had dismissed her just days before was now eager to work with her. Dr. Velnara was among the last to approach. Dr. Martinez, I have a proposal. Our research station is planning a long-term study of the Tau Ceti system. Would you be interested in leading that project? Lisa felt surprised and honored. You want me to lead the research team? After this week, I think it's clear that you understand these organisms better than anyone else, Dr. Velnara replied. Your biological approach is exactly what we need for this investigation. Lisa looked around at the scientists still gathered in the auditorium. A week ago, these same beings had offered to help her understand advanced concepts. Now they were asking her to lead their most important research project. It was a remarkable transformation, but Lisa knew the real work was just beginning. Changing attitudes and building better collaboration would take time and continued effort. But this week had shown that change was possible when people were willing to question their assumptions and listen to different perspectives. 6 months later, Lisa stood in the command center of the newly established Tau Ceti research station. Through the large observation windows, she could see the distant star that housed the remarkable radiation-adapted organisms she had identified. The station hummed with activity as scientists from across the galaxy worked together to study this unique ecosystem. Dr. Velnara approached from the main communications console, her crystalline form reflecting the soft lights of the command center. Dr. Martinez, we just received confirmation from the probe team. They've detected the seasonal migration patterns you predicted. Lisa smiled and moved to the central display screen. The data from their remote sensing probes showed exactly what her biological analysis had suggested: organisms moving between different radiation zones as the planets in the system completed their orbital cycles. The migrations follow the radiation gradients perfectly, Dr. Kekstar observed, joining them at the display. His 4 arms gestured at the data streams. The organisms moved to maintain optimal energy absorption levels throughout their planetary year. Lisa nodded, feeling satisfied but not surprised. It's the same principle as seasonal animal migrations on Earth, just with radiation levels instead of temperature or food availability. The research station represented a new model for galactic scientific collaboration. Instead of organizing teams by species or academic credentials, Lisa had created mixed groups based on complementary skills and perspectives. Altarian mathematical precision worked alongside human pattern recognition. Vegan harmonic analysis combined with Proximan quantum modeling. Dr. Fluxera floated over to their group, his tentacles carrying data tablets from the biochemistry lab. Dr. Martinez, our analysis of the organism samples is revealing fascinating adaptations. Their cellular structure includes radiation-absorbing organelles that work like solar panels. Any signs of intelligence? Lisa asked. Definite evidence of complex social behaviors, Dr. Fluxera replied. The larger organisms seem to coordinate their movements with smaller ones. It might be symbiosis, or it could indicate social intelligence. Lisa felt excited by this possibility. The biological interpretation of the signals had proven correct in every detail, but the organisms were turning out to be even more remarkable than she had first imagined. Dr. Zolthek approached from the xenobiology lab, his green skin bright with excitement. Dr. Martinez, we need to discuss expanding the research scope. The organisms aren't just adapted to radiation, they're actively modifying their environment. Lisa raised her eyebrows. Modifying it how? They're creating structures, Dr. Zolthek explained. Radiation-focusing formations that concentrate energy in specific areas. It's environmental engineering on a massive scale. This was a development Lisa had not anticipated. Environmental modification suggested a level of sophistication that went beyond simple adaptation. These organisms might be capable of complex planning and construction. We need to be very careful about how we study this, Lisa said. If these organisms are modifying their environment deliberately, our presence might disrupt their activities. Dr. Velnara's crystalline features brightened. You're suggesting we treat them as potentially intelligent beings rather than simple biological specimens. Exactly, Lisa confirmed. Even if they're not intelligent in ways we recognize, they're clearly more complex than typical organisms. We need to study them without interfering with their natural behaviors. This careful approach had become characteristic of Lisa's research methods. The station followed strict protocols to minimize their impact on the organisms they studied. All observations were conducted remotely, and no direct samples were taken without careful consideration of potential consequences. Dr. Raksani, who had become one of Lisa's closest collaborators, approached with a communication tablet. Dr. Martinez, we've received a priority message from the Galactic Research Council. They want to nominate you for the Kepler Prize for Excellence in Xenobiological Research. Lisa felt surprised and honored. The Kepler Prize was the highest recognition in galactic xenobiology, usually awarded to scientists with decades of distinguished research. That's very flattering, but I think the whole team deserves recognition for this work. The nomination specifically mentions your leadership in developing new collaborative research methods, Dr. Raksani explained. Your approach to mixed species research teams is being adopted by institutions throughout the galaxy. This news pleased Lisa more than the personal recognition. The collaborative methods developed at Tau Ceti Station were proving successful beyond their original project. Other research facilities were creating similar diverse teams and reporting improved results from combining different species perspectives. Dr. Kekstar activated the main communication system. Dr. Martinez, we have an incoming message from Earth's Xenobiology Department. They want to discuss establishing an exchange program with our station. Issa moved to the communication console and accepted the incoming transmission. The face of Dr. Williams, her former mentor from Earth, appeared on the screen. Lisa, Dr. Williams said with obvious excitement. We've been following your work at Tau Ceti Station. The collaborative research model you've developed is getting attention throughout human scientific communities. It's working well here, Lisa replied. Different perspectives really do lead to better science. That's why I'm calling, Dr. Williams continued. We want to propose a formal exchange program. Young human scientists could come to Tau Ceti Station to learn collaborative research methods, and alien scientists could visit Earth to study our approaches to environmental adaptation. Lisa felt excited by this possibility. An exchange program could help spread collaborative research methods throughout the galaxy while giving human scientists more opportunities to participate in galactic research. I think that's an excellent idea, she said. Dr. Velnara, what do you think about hosting exchange students here? Dr. Velnara moved into view of the communication screen. We would be honored to participate in such a program. Dr. Martinez has shown us how much we can learn from different approaches to scientific thinking. As they discussed details of the exchange program, Lisa reflected on how much had changed since the conference 6 months earlier. The same scientists who had offered to help her understand advanced concepts were now seeking to learn from her research methods. But more importantly, the broader galactic scientific community was beginning to recognize the value of diverse perspectives in research. Publications were starting to include authors from multiple species, and conference presentations were featuring collaborative analyses that combined different approaches. After the communication ended, Lisa walked to the observation deck to look out at the Tau Ceti system. The organisms they were studying continued their complex activities, unaware that they had become the catalyst for a revolution in galactic scientific collaboration. Dr. Velnara joined her at the observation window. Dr. Martinez, do you ever think about what might have happened if you hadn't spoken up at the conference? Lisa considered the question. The biological explanation would have been discovered eventually. Good science has a way of revealing the truth, even when it takes longer than it should. But the collaborative methods might not have developed, Dr. Velnara pointed out. Your experience at the conference showed us how our assumptions were limiting our research effectiveness. Lisa nodded. Sometimes the most important discoveries aren't about the phenomena we're studying. Sometimes they're about better ways to conduct the research itself. As evening fell on the station, Lisa reviewed the day's research reports. Every department was making steady progress in understanding the radiation-adapted organisms. More importantly, the diverse research teams were finding solutions and asking questions that no single species would have developed alone. The success at Tau Ceti Station was being noticed throughout the galaxy. Other research facilities were adopting similar collaborative approaches, and the results were consistently positive. Mixed species teams were solving problems faster and developing more comprehensive theories than traditional research groups. Lisa prepared her daily report for the Galactic Research Council, summarizing the day's discoveries and progress. As she worked, she thought about the young scientists who would soon arrive through the exchange program. They would learn not just about xenobiology, but about the value of listening to different perspectives and questioning their own assumptions. The radiation-adapted organisms of Tau Ceti had taught the galactic scientific community an important lesson. The most remarkable discoveries often came from recognizing that extraordinary phenomena could have simple explanations. But they required researchers willing to consider all possibilities, regardless of their source. Lisa finished her report and looked out once more at the distant star. Tomorrow would bring new discoveries and new challenges. But she felt confident that the collaborative approach they had developed would continue to yield insights that no single perspective could achieve alone. The conference that had begun with dismissive attitudes and condescending offers of help had evolved into a new model for galactic scientific cooperation. It was a transformation that benefited not just human researchers, but the entire galactic community's pursuit of knowledge and understanding.